Happy Friday and welcome to our Friday night town hall. And I'm so excited because I get to sit and chat with one of our own, Delicia Hand. She is the chair of our policy committee for Moms of Black Boys United, Mob United for Social Change. She is a board member. She is a sister friend. She stuck with me for life. Delicia, welcome.
Thank you, Kim. Appreciate you having me here. Glad
So
to be with you.
we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, and you'll learn through this talk. And I've learned as we've prepped for this that it's been around for a long time. And it's been around in ways that we have not imagined. And Delicia, just 30 seconds before going live, I kept saying, I'm done with AI. And she's continuously reminding me that I can't be done. So if I can't be done, I might as well learn. And so I appreciate you sharing your subject matter expertise on this and give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Kim. So I would say, there's probably tons of people with far more expertise on AI than me, but I started this journey diving more deeply into artificial intelligence about 3 years ago. But by training, I'm an attorney. And probably for the last 15 years or so, I have worked in consumer finance or consumer protection, specifically with a focus on consumer financial products. So your everyday banking, checking, savings, credit, et cetera. And I spent 10 years prior to my current job working for a financial regulator. And so, in that capacity, I learned a ton about various different financial products and just developed an appreciation for the role in which technology, emerging technologies, whether they be blockchain, which powers digital assets or cryptocurrency, or artificial intelligence, is really changing the landscape, changing the products on the marketplace and computers. And so I started to learn more about artificial intelligence in that capacity when I was at a financial regulator, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And in my current capacity, I work for an organization called Consumer Reports. I'm the senior director of digital marketplace. And my job is I lead a team of technologists, journalists, policy analysts, et cetera, and help to ensure that digital marketplaces are safe for consumers. We develop tests to test digital products, platforms, devices that connect you. And as part of that, we also examine products that use artificial intelligence and are really just trying to better understand artificial intelligence itself and how it affects us. So that is how I come to this space and this conversation.
All right. I still say you're a subject matter expert. You are our subject matter expert. So
Thank you.
that's that. We want to start out with some of the definitions and the kinds of things we regularly see. So we're going to share a slideshow because, like I said at the outset, I don't know that everyone thinks of AI the way that it's really integrated in our lives daily. I know I didn't. And so it has truly been enlightening. So I'm going to give the helm over to Delicia, and we are going to go through her slideshow presentation.
Sure. So definitions first, because we got to know what we're talking about first before we know how it impacts us. So at its basic level, artificial intelligence is a branch of consumer science, and it really deals with, or when we talk about AI, we're talking about the capability of the computer or a machine to imitate intelligent human behavior. So that can be in all different ways. The machine or the computer can imitate, for example, complex mathematics. It can play games. It can make decisions. It can also help us, as if you've ever used Google Translate, it can help us quickly translate language. And so you're really talking about the ability to simulate human behavior. And as we'll see in the next slide, AI has been around for a very long time. So there's been a lot of conversation in the last couple of years about AI because of the emergence of more accessible tools that make AI much more accessible and manipulable and usable by everyday human beings. But it's been around since the 1950s. And this is back when computers were the size of entire rooms. And so it was coined in the 1950s when computer scientists use a computer to mimic human decision making and specifically to conduct seminars. And then, as you'll see here over time, AI and its usage has evolved in different ways. So it's come a long way from its history to present day. At the root, it includes basic machine learning. And then it has built over time to what we call machine intelligence. And that's kind of where we are now, where we're seeing machines independently or computers leveraging AI. You know, be able to produce new content, new visuals, new music through a series of inputs and algorithms. The future of AI, which is the stuff of sci-fi, is machine consciousness. So this is where, potentially the machines may not need us or can independently um, do things without us. They may not need the algorithms that or the set of instructions that we currently give machines. So I think if we go to the next slide, um, as I often say to Kim, she can't be done with AI because guess what? AI is not done with you. AI is everywhere. At its basic level, in a number of different ways, we interact with AI in many, many different ways every day. So AI is used, for example, in a just base reactive way to play games. So if you've ever played any kind of game, computerized game, you've probably been interacting with a form of AI called reactive machine learning. If you have ever ridden in an autonomous vehicle, you're dealing with another kind of AI called limited memory. It has a very specific job and it will repetitively do that job. So autonomous self-driving vehicles are an example of that. Natural language processing is a now very popular form of AI where it is used to, you can use AI through what we call natural language, meaning as the words are coming out of my mouth, rather than writing code, I can now interact with software and give verbal prompts. And even before ChatGPT, you were interacting with this kind of AI. So if you've used Siri, Alexa, Netflix, use Netflix recommendations, you have used AI. If you use Google Maps, you use AI. If you use facial recognition technology to open your phone, you are using AI. And so it is really proliferous in that it's everywhere in all of these various fields that you see represented here. In pharma and medicine, AI is now helping scientists to discover different genetic patterns of disease, but also patterns for potential cures for medicine. So it is very much infused in all of these different kinds of functions. Um, and and so this is why I say we have to know about AI. We have to know how it is that it's part of our automotive system, part of our homes, the smart devices that we're using in our homes, and how does it infuse our body politic? right? So, how does it enter into voting and elections, advertising, our interactions on social media? Um, so, where I'd like to maybe go next, if it makes sense, Kim, is to talk about what are first some of the concerns, and then how does it enter into these different areas, particularly when we think about elections and voting. So, on the one hand, there are great benefits to AI in the same way where using a computer, using a calculator, any kind of assistive device or technology brings a certain amount of expediency, convenience. It helps us to skip steps. It also helps us to, frankly, process a lot of data and information and identify new discoveries quicker. So you're seeing that a lot, in particular in medicine. So those are all benefits, right?
Mm,
The challenge and the concerns about AI is that there's a couple of things. So, one, the pace of technology often eclipses the pace of policy, laws, and regulation that govern the space. Before you can blink, there's a new technology abound, and we're still dealing with laws on the books from the 1970s. Um,
mm,
so, there are fundamental civil rights, financial rights, when it comes to the field that I directly work in, for example, that are referring to technologies from the 1970s, and they haven't changed since then. Um, and on the other hand, we have technologies that, we saw growing up watching Star Trek, where we're on these devices where we can scroll through. And so there's a little bit of an asymmetry there. And so it creates these gaps in consumer protections and risk for consumers. So that's one of the first concerns.
So I want to interrupt you for a second because um, I'm just thinking about regulations. So,
Mhm.
you as an attorney, me as a nurse by trade, I think about, what the FDA does, how we develop um, kind of think tanks around what is beneficial, what works. We try to project what some of the uh, risk factors are, try to project what are the side effects of things. How is this regulated? And are there people really looking at how this can be detrimental in the future?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, on the one hand and the other, I'm going to be very loyally about this in this conversation. So, on the one hand, the good thing is right now globally, there's you can't get away from the AI conversation. There are many different countries, state bodies at the global as well as federal level in this country talking about AI. Why? Because a couple of years ago, in particular, there'd always been conversations around AI, but one of the things that really shifted the game is the entrance of these everyday products. So self-automated, um, autonomous self-driving vehicles, for example, its entry into science. So there are now surgeries, for example, that surgeons use robots with. So
Mhm.
we start to get to a point probably about, and I would say in the late 2000s, where you start to see much more explicitly um, machines kind of cross over from really complex code to being much more present and simple and easy to access and more usable by everyday human beings. We're interacting with Siri or Alexa or all these other assistive devices. And so, on the one hand, while that elevated the visibility of AI, what it started to do globally was start a lot of conversations, but not much movement in terms of actual updates and changes to the law. Unfortunately, in the technology space, the financial services space where I am, the trend tends to be that ever since the 2000, the U.S. has largely lagged in the global community from a regulatory standpoint. So the pattern in the U.S. tends to be technology is out there and being used first, and then it's got to go through Congress, different state bodies. It's just overly complex, and so you don't tend to see regulation. And in fact, it's only the last few years, the last 3 or 4 years or so, that you've actually seen um, organizations really take steps to articulate policies around AI and guidance around AI, but we're still not at the point where you have, at the federal level, national mandates, legal requirements that govern companies' use of AI, what happens to the data that they use, who owns it, if they use AI to make a decision and AI gets it wrong,
Mhm.
who's at fault. So there are all these questions that are percolating that are still not answered. And they're going through multiple bodies. Congress has a few bills, a number of states, Colorado, and New York in particular. Actually, this week, the Colorado legislature um, passed a fairly comprehensive AI bill. It was the first of its kind in the country. So um, it's getting there, but it largely lags behind. And
Wow.
part of that has to do with how we think about AI. We don't see it. It's behind the scenes. And so in a way, it's kind of considered, you know, kind of coding, but there are real dangers that we're starting to see
Mhm.
from the lack of regulation.
I've been saying for years our phones are listening to us. You say that my Android is worse than your iPhone, but I say your iPhone is worse than my Android. You just having a regular conversation, and all of a sudden you have 15 ads that come up because your phone has heard you say I need new curtains, and now they're marketing, and it
Mhm.
happens so quickly. Sometimes I'm talking, and then I pick up my phone, and just that instantaneously I have all of these ads. I think that's a good segue to talk about these deep fakes, and this next slide that you have here about how people are using AI to kind of interfere with our lives.
Yeah. So to speak more specifically, some of the concerns about AI, and it's AI, but it's also within this very hyper connected and hyper technical world. To go back to your example, Kim, of your
Mhm,
phone, right? So,
mhm,
you know, um, in the first iteration of the web, for example, you could only read. You barely had browsers, and
mhm,
all you could do is read, and the processing was very slow. Then, along came Web 2, where you could read and maybe you could write, right? So you start to see some more sophisticated websites and things like that. Web3 is a whole new world where you've got supercomputing on these mobile devices. You can be connected 24/7 and powered by AI and other technologies. These devices can also listen, right? So they can interact with you. And so, one of the concerns that impacts voting and these other issues is, one, AI can greatly amplify biases. So, at its base, um, what powers AI, among other things, is data, right? So, what makes AI so powerful is that it has the ability, it's a supercomputing mechanism, right? Um, to really process, synthesize vast amounts of data. And then with direction, and that direction can be an algorithm, it can be words if I use generative AI and what they call a natural language processing tool.
mhm.
I can literally give a verbal instruction and use an AI. model or tool to help me make decisions, create something, etc. So, at its base, if you think about things like financial services,
Mm,
for example, where banks and credit card companies use data to make decisions about who's credit worthy, who's not.
mhm,
Um, if the data is flawed, if the data is biased, if the data is limited, if the data, for example, if you live, communities of color tend to have predominantly more predatory financial services, which means they have worse products, which tends to mean that they're more costly. And then it tends to mean that you have a lower credit score,
mhm,
right? So if I move from that area, my credit score moves with me and I go apply for a loan, that bank using machine learning technology that is now evaluating my credit worthiness will have bad data.
mhm,
Right? It will have data that even if I pay my bills on time, just by virtue of where I live and the kinds of products that are available to me, it puts me at a very different starting place than if I lived in another neighborhood with different kinds of financial institutions.
mhm,
So in that way, AI can amplify biases that are already present in the data that it uses, and so this often leads to discriminatory outcomes for communities of color. There's also challenges because there's a lack of diversity in AI development, right? So who's actually creating these AI models? Who's making the algorithms, right? Like the halls of IBM, Microsoft, Google, etc. Do they look like you or me, or are we, sprinkled throughout, right? And so the people developing the algorithms can also create biases, even if unintentional. When ChatGPT, right before it was released, for example, the company OpenAI, who released ChatGPT, they did a bunch of different testing, but one of the tests that they did was just did some basic terminology searches. And they asked GPT to come back with images of professionals, right? And certain professions. And GPT came back with, I think the query was something like asking for pictures of doctors, or a very prominent AI researcher, Joy Balawemi, who is a woman of color, along with Timnit Jibru. They did a study in 2018 showing, for example, if you use Amazon, it often could not, if you use Amazon's facial recognition technology, it often, it was 35% more likely to not recognize women of color than any other
mhm.
racial group. So the
Heck,
bias
even
and
Google, when you put in, beautiful woman, show
yeah,
me a beautiful woman,
exactly.
um, it you it doesn't come back, or show a picture of a criminal. Like, these are all things you see these things online, and then you go and you do them on Google. But what it sounds like you're saying is, um, somewhere along the lines, because this is fed information, the information that was fed was someone's personal definition of something, and it contained bias.
Yeah, or I think one way to think about it is, if the data set or information set that AI uses is literally the entire World Wide Web, right? There's a lot of good stuff out there. There's also a lot of incorrect stuff, crazy stuff, harmful stuff, um, not representative stuff, right? In terms of the data. And so if it is pulling from a flawed data set, you are going to get flawed outcomes and flawed results. And so, what you're starting to see with the use of some of these technologies, facial recognition, et cetera, is that biased data produces biased outcomes. And so, this is one of the real concerns, especially then when these technologies are started to be used in law enforcement. Some of the earliest use cases for Amazon's facial recognition recognition technology, for
Mhm.
example, was tested by law enforcement.
Mhm.
And that's what this study in 2018 tried to highlight, which is to say, well, hang on a second. This software is 35% more likely to be incorrect and incorrectly identify Black women in particular. But this software is also being used by law enforcement
Right.
officers.
Mhm.
And so that is one of the dangers, right? It increases the potential for wrongful arrests, wrongful encounters, and additionally erosion of privacy and perpetuating certain stereotypes. So that is one of the challenges. One of the other ones that pertains more to, I would say, uh, the the current environment politically and also in this hyper connected social media world is AI is now in the hands of everyone. If you wanted to, you could go to ChatGPT or use some other tool right now and say, create an image of X. Here's some photos, cobble it together, and produce me an image or video of Joe Biden quacking like a duck. And you could probably succeed.
Right.
Um, and so, in the hands of more nefarious actors or
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be highly nefarious, but people who want to use this powerful tool to mislead, then you start to see things like deep fakes that are occurring where you have images that appear to be very, very real, but they're not. And so that is one of the concerns here. And maybe just as an example, we can maybe play this first video here in
The fake
the slide.
Biden
Yeah,
robocall, that one?
yeah.
Uh-oh, let's go back. I don't know if I can play it from here. I might have to play
Mm,
it from the slideshow itself.
yeah.
1 second. We're gonna get this together.
It's okay. And if not, I can talk through some of the examples of what's in each of these links, and maybe we can list them on the page.
Here we go. Can you see it now?
No, not yet.
Oh, I know.
What should we do?
This is
I know what to do.
Mandatory ad.
Go to
yeah, we can get her in as soon as it's
cashnetUSA.com.
finished.
I can apply in minutes, and if approved, we could have the money in our account as soon as the same business day.
You're my hero.
Saving the day is easy with CashNet USA.
When you need money fast, be the hero. Go to cashnetUSA.com to apply for the money you need now.
We'll have to get
A dirty political trick in New Hampshire.
It's important that you save your vote for the November election. Voting this Tuesday only enables the Republicans in their quest to elect Donald Trump again.
Now, that sounds like a plea from Joe Biden, except that it isn't. And now it's under investigation by the New Hampshire Attorney General. And joining me now is the mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu. Mayor Wu, thank you
And
for.
we can pause there. And so I just wanted to show an example of how AI in the hands of people who are trying to interfere with lawful elections, for example, and to prevent certain communities from coming out. So in this instance, this robocall was heard by in a community that was predominantly persons of color, right? So, you think about that, right? So they were able to target a certain zip code and
Mhm.
target robocalls. And then two, could you tell that wasn't Joe Biden, our president? And they're telling people, don't go out and vote, stay home. The primary is not that important. And there's another example under this from a recent Chicago election. So this is also not just a national issue in terms of national elections. This is also happening on the ground and impacting local mayoral and other municipal level elections as well. And so AI has a lot of benefits, but it also comes with some significant dangers when these tools, if unregulated, can be used to spread misinformation and manipulate public opinion. And so this is one of the, it just adds insult to injury.
Well, even I know probably about 6 weeks ago or so, I shared something with you where it was a mom calling a daughter saying she was stranded on the side of the road and she needed money for a tow truck because she forgot her wallet. But it was just somebody who had generated her voice, and the mom was fine and home and didn't need anything. And luckily, the daughter called the mom to verify before sending any money. But I just was so amazed at how easy it is to clone someone's voice.
Yeah.
So much so now that, like, when my phone rings and I don't know the number, I don't say anything because I don't want you to clone me.
Yeah, 100%. Deep fakes are not just videos that we see online, but they are also helping to perpetuate voice recognition scams where people will get a phone call and their voice will be recorded. They'll take an imprint and then they can move on and use it in other contexts. So we're in a really interesting time where we have this very, very powerful tool that is out there. They're not just ChatGPT, but there are other tools that are in a lot of different hands. And lawmakers, thankfully, nationally and at the state level, I think now realize the urgency. But the question is, can they get it together? Can they work in a bipartisan way to actually land on concrete helpful protections in place so that there are guardrails for use of AI. So, it's a space that we in particular as an organization will need to keep monitoring, because another one of the ways in which AI is often used is in law enforcement. In fact, one of the first places that some of this facial recognition software was tested out via services provided by AWS and other large companies was in what we call predictive policing. So using AI algorithms that attempt to predict crime hotspots or help police officers or law enforcement officers develop profiles of individuals that are likely to commit crimes. So this is one of the first uses of AI in law enforcement. And what we saw, there's some studies that have come out in the last several years showing that as I mentioned, so this is one of them, the study by Joy Bolawume, and it shows that it can actually lead to a risk of over policing of marginalized communities. The challenge is that we already know that our communities are already over policed. And so now there's over policing on steroids because you've got these powerful predictive tools that if you're already biased to begin with and you think, oh man, this is AI, I'm using computer science, this has got to be right. It frankly just reinforces and potentially cements that bias. And so that's an area concern. AI is also now used in risk assessment tools. So, ironically, the same technology that is used in finance to determine your risk worthiness to get a loan. For example, it's the same tool that is used to determine bail, sentencing, um,
Wow.
and parole decisions. Which again, we already live in a system that is biased in the criminal justice system. We are not just over police, we're over sentenced. We are often denied bail, and powered by these smarter tools, right? Decision makers, judges, district attorneys, prosecutors will then only continue to reinforce these biases. And so being used to determine bail, sentences, there's great concern that that they will just continue to perpetuate biases in the criminal justice system.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's like this country doesn't work for us now, you know, and we're in a situation where does this become the next I was scared? You know, does oh well AI said it was, you know, it wasn't us. AI said so, you know, and that become the next scapegoat to getting justice and accountability in so many cases where police get it wrong or you know AI gets it wrong. Clearly by this graphic it shows that it's not a stretch.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's absolutely not a stretch. And what it should tell you is also the limits and the bounds of AI in and of itself. So it's very, very powerful, right? But again, it's only as powerful as the underlying data sets, right? And so if we live in this country of historical and systemic bias, then that bias is only reinforced and frankly exacerbated by these tools. Um, Thankfully, look, these tools are not just in the hands of entrenched systemic,
Mhm.
institutions, but they're in our hands as well. So this is why I say you should AI every day, right? You should learn what it is, right? And some of the work that I'm doing in what we call the financial inclusion movement is working with companies who are using what we call developing debiasing techniques. And so, look, if it's a tool that can enslave us, it can also potentially be a tool that can empower us and free us. And so, there are a number of organizations out there like the Algorithmic Justice League, or there's so many different organizations that are working to really lean into these technologies and see what they can do. If they are powerful and can do harm, they are powerful and they can do good. And so there's some amazing work going on around racial justice and inclusion to use these algorithms to do things like debias, right? So if you've got bad data, can you train AI to root out the bad data or to discover good data, such that if a financial institution was going to make a decision based on a flawed credit score, can it find alternative data, additional data points to consider you? So some of those same considerations will apply, I would say, in the context of engagement with law enforcement and some of these algorithms that are used to determine bail, sentencing, and things like that.
It feels like the new civil rights movement, right? It
Yes,
feels like
absolutely. The new civil rights movement, and I say this all the time in the financial services context, is not going to be won by law. It just can't. By the time Congress meets, our political systems are so fractured, and distrust of our political system is at an all-time high. I'm not saying that technology is also, AI is going to be our savior. I'm not saying that.
Mhm.
But we have no choice but to get in it,
Mhm.
learn what it is, use it every day, work with those organizations that are trying to develop algorithms that drive fairness, accountability, that provide more transparency. And so, you know, Congress is not going to pass a law that is going to give us everything that we need anytime soon. And so the work to be done is on the ground, developing code that can bring us justice faster than any lawmaker can. And I know I say that being our head of policy, but we're in a very interesting moment when your information is being used in this way. You have to think about it in terms of, well, if the laws are outdated, are there things that we can do in the app, in the technology? Are there design principles that we can push companies to adopt so that we can fight back in a different way?
But that also does drive policy, right? You say that as the head of policy, but we've seen over and over and over again in the old civil rights movement how much we've had to do with boots on the ground to then start to drive that policy, to change, to get lawmakers to listen, to really, for lack of a better term, have an uprising, like having those types of situations that then say, okay, they're not going to back down. They're not going to be quiet. And so it's kind of top down, but that's kind of the way we've gotten most of what we have as a people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to, you read my mind, kind of just also just quickly flip through a couple of the slides again, just to reinforce how pervasive, and going back to this year, it's an election year, and maybe then shift into, well, what can people do if you're on the ground? But, maybe to add some comic relief, or maybe not, right? The slide after this is just this week. This week was the Met Gala in New York, right? Big celebrity event, happens every year, I guess. And these are all AI generated fakes of celebrities. In the middle, there's a picture of Rihanna. Rihanna was at home. She did not attend the Met Gala, but somebody out in the interwebs decided to put together a picture of her. I think there were 2 AI images generated of Katy Perry. One was of her mom and herself.
Happy Mother's Day.
Oh, thank you.
Do it tomorrow.
Okay, we'll do. My son just gave me Mother's Day present.
Now you have to come on camera. We got to see him.
He just left. But so it's not just infusing our politics, but it's also infusing our entertainment. And to shift back to our politics,
Before we go on to the politics thing, I think it also speaks to, I don't know who did what in the rap world and what's true and what's not true, but you see all of these new images coming up and all of these things, these accusations that are coming out about a lot of the big name people in the entertainment industry, and it comes with all of these pictures. So if it's that easy to put someone who was at home, at the Met Gala, how hard is it to now generate AI proof that might, because are people really doing their due diligence to make sure that it's real or not real? I'm looking at this picture, and if I saw it, I would say it's real. How do we know it's fake? When do we know it's fake?
Yeah. So there are tools that have been developed, and some of these are not new. I think coming out of even before the last election, right? We knew that misinformation exists. And so there are websites like Snopes and PolitiFact that offer fact-checking services. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago at Harvard and MIT and listened to a couple of professors who are working with their students to develop technologies to address this primary issue. And they are now working primarily with, in preparation for this election, they're working with news agencies and college campuses all over the country to I forget the name of the tool, but it's basically an app where if you see something, you can effectively scan it. And it has mostly to do with images, right? Because it's this is the world that we live in. So if you see a fake video or you see a video or a picture and you want to know if it's fake or not, what it is done is use AI to basically scour the web to find the original image. And then once it locates the original image, then it compares it to. So that's a cool thing is, and I saw a demo of it where they uh, found a number of images that, like this one, look real, look like our former president meeting with African Americans is actually a fake picture generated by, not by he himself, but supporters. And this emerged, has started to emerge several months ago. So this, I think, particular image emerged towards the end of last year, in furtherance of trying to help him. So I don't think it's an official image or anything like that. And then these are other examples of those images. So there are tools that are starting to be developed. Photo forensics is one of them. There's a browser called Invid that you can use that helps you to analyze images and videos that are out there for signs of manipulation. And I would think about these kinds of tools in the same way I think about protecting my home internet system, right? You want to engage in a safe and secure way. And so this is going to become a new norm, right? Because as these tools that are out there that you can propagate fake imagery, right? You're going to need tools to be able to discern what's fake and what's real. So I would highly encourage. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think the scary part of having to have the mindset of discernment in a situation like this, one of the things that we've been talking about with Mob United is for 2024, the graduating class nationally is about 4 million kids, right? Young adults that are going to become old enough to vote and have likely started the process at this point to registering to vote.
Yeah.
Now we have all of these deep fakes and AI generated imagery that's out there. Are they is that the mindset? Is that the ages and stages of discernment and looking to figure out whether something is real or fake? I joke all the time with my kids and I'm like, oh, it's true. It was on the internet, complete joke. But I think with the stage in life that says I'm invincible, also comes the stage in life that says everything is believable.
Yeah.
Because they're not questioning things. And so, that's a scary thing to me.
Yeah. 100%. My kids are 6 and 8, and like a year or two ago, one of them started saying, well, I got it from Google. Google doesn't lie, and so they're growing up in this digitally connected way, which is profoundly different from how we've come up, right? And so we don't have, I don't think they have the same inherent suspicion. And then on the other hand, I feel somewhat optimistic because frankly, I feel like I have to work to just catch up to understand what the newest things are. At least they are the first, well, Gen Z and now Alpha, but they're digitally native, right? So at least where I feel like I gotta study up all the time just to catch up. They're in it. And so they're in a space where I think there's probably more awareness, and there's studies showing that the digitally native generation, because they exist in a world of things like catfishing, deep fakes, etc. All these things are part of their lingo and their consciousness.
Mm.
Um, it doesn't mean that you should relax. And at the same time, they're growing up where there are now tool sets that are now available, Snopes, PolitiFact, etc., that are also part of their vocabulary. So I'm simultaneously scared, but also hopeful, right? Because to live in an environment where you have all of these things that may not be real. I mean, they're living in a metaverse, for crying out loud, where they can develop avatars and go inner. I don't even understand it, right? Um, and so they are encountering situations that we could have only imagined, when I was a child. This is their life. And so I think from that perspective, you can't be too careful enough. In my household, for example, none of my kids have direct access to a browser. They may have a device, but they don't have a browser.
Mhm.
I no longer use Google Chrome. I use privacy focused browsers. Like, there's a few different companies. I use DuckDuckGo because they block trackers. They explicitly say they don't collect user data,
Mhm.
and they don't follow you around with ads. So I do things like that, and I use that language. I make sure that my kids know that the internet is not a safe place, and it's a place that they have to go with caution. And we regularly talk about things like that, but it is scary.
Yeah, I got a message the other day. I use Experian. Like I have a subscription to Experian, and they like flagged my credit report, my credit thing, and they were like, "Oh, your social security number was found on the dark web." First of all, I don't even know what the dark web is. That's the first thing. Like, is it Black Twitter? Like, what is the dark web? That's number one. Number two, how did my social security number get there? And then how do I get it off? So, and I don't know the answers to any of
Yeah.
those questions, right? I still don't know the answers to those questions. So I lock my credit report,
Yeah.
just hoping that that's enough, because I don't know what to do. Or the other day, I got a phone call from somebody calling me from my phone number. They clearly cloned my number in some way, right? To try to get me to answer the phone. It's so ingenious that if people put that kind of effort to doing good, we would be the Jetsons right now. But
Mhm.
instead, you're just trying to steal from me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the dark web is probably, subject of another conversation, but, like, AI, it's just another tool set. I mean, frankly, the dark web is all around us. It's people who have access to systems that can help them anonymize their location and their IP address so that they can engage in bad behavior, usually pertains to trying to hack into public and private systems to get information and to sell it to the highest bidder. It's a big old digitized flea market. And I don't have nothing against flea markets. I went to several flea markets growing up, right? But it's a place, but it enables people who can't be traced to sell your personal information to the highest bidder, right? So I can go on these different sites and say, I want to buy a portfolio of these 10 social security numbers so I can try and open up multiple credit lines, et cetera. And I'll pay whatever the going rate is. And so it's real, it exists. And again, it's why we're in a space where I think the only way to fight it is to be in it, right? When the first computer was built, and we took coding lessons. My first computer class was Q Basic, and we had the little like dark screen and
Right? Oh
flashing
my God,
cursor,
no.
right? We had to learn it back then. And to me, I think that's fundamentally one of the things that we've lost in a way as a society, is that, requirement of requiring that fundamental understanding so that you can actually have some agency and control. The good thing is that you no longer
Right?
need to do that, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it became an industry. And now, we have people who like Beth, who's always behind the scenes. She's
Mhm.
here today and won't talk to us. But
Mhm.
should it became an industry, because I do remember that. I remember when I was in my early 20s, when I'm like on a C prompt on DOS, coming up with some sort of language that this computer is going to spit out a report that I need. Um, with the information that I need.
Yeah.
And it was kind of hit or miss. And you're sitting there, and it was archaic compared to what we have now. Um,
Guess what, Kim? That was AI. I mean, like in its very simplest term, right? It was a very rudimentary and simpler version of it, right? But you put a prompt, it followed it, right? And we just have much more complex systems. But at the same time, these systems are now much more easily navigable. I don't need to know the code. I can actually talk to a computer in natural language. I can type out a set of prompts in the same words that are coming out of my mouth and ask the computer to write an algorithm for me that can do something, or frankly, to go and perform multiple tasks. And so, how about we ask the computer for some justice? I'm kind of being tongue in cheek, but what would that look like? And so this is some of the work I do around more financial justice issues, to really think about, okay, if our laws and our civil rights are being eroded, right? Are there other tool sets that can be developed more through technologies to help us finally win some of these fights? And some of these fights have to do with who owns our data, what can they do with it, how are they using it to help to harm us or to help us. And so it's interesting stuff. I really encourage people to learn more about this subject. Some of the terms are things like algorithmic bias. Just Google it, learn about it. Um, Go on chat.
not Google.
Oh, yeah. As my
But
kids say, search it up.
to your point, though, it's not just can we use AI to get justice, and I don't say it tongue in cheek, but can we use AI, the outcomes that AI is currently giving us, as the training tool, as the cultural humility training tool, to show, hey, look, here is the data you gave your computer. Here's the data you guys have provided, and here are the outcomes more often than not. That could be a part of the new cultural humility training that says you have to stop feeding this data. This is your bias, right? This is
Yeah.
the history and the culture of this country. It's not an individual person, but it's the collective.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are organizations, for example, like the Algorithmic Justice League or the Data for Black Lives movement, that are actually using computing techniques to fight against um, bias and systemic injustices. So there's techniques like debiasing. So if you want, for example, to challenge maybe some of the predictive policing data, people are designing models whose jobs, computing models or algorithmic models, whose job it is to actually say, okay, there's this data set that AI was used to produce, or these decisions that AI was used to produce. Give me an alternative outcome, or there are also organizations that are developing things that are called challenger models. That again, the job that this does is really sort of competes against the sort of normative model that's used in a system to sort of push it to do better than it's currently doing. So yeah, there is definitely a new civil rights movement in that way, where people are using these algorithms to try to fight against some of these systemic challenges.
This was so interesting. I have a deep aversion to technology on a whole. But between you and Beth, you guys are dragging me along. It's real, like you said. It's not, it's no longer the sci-fi, unrealistic thing that we've always thought about or imagined. And it doesn't look like we thought it would look when we were watching the Jetsons or when the first Terminator came out, but it definitely looks like something that we need to be aware of.
Yeah.
So,
100%.
yeah. Thank you so much. This has been super informative.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I love it. I love it. This will live on our platforms, on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. This will not be the last conversation we have about it because, like Delicia shared, it isn't going anywhere. It's around. Join us on Sunday for our special Mother's Day featured programming with our own Kathy McCoy. We will be talking on behalf of, for, and about moms who have lost their children, and we want to highlight, celebrate, and encourage them this Mother's Day. So that will be Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Delicia, again, thank you. Thank you for everything you do for Mob United, and join us on Sunday. Good night.
Thanks, Kim.